Hello, I'll be getting started here in just a second. As a matter of fact, let's just flip and I'll turn on my robot. There we go. There's my CamBot. And let's see here. Overview, user attributes. I'm going to need to create a new application registration. New registration. GM tools dash MS graph access. Accounts in this organizational directory only. I believe that's what I'm going to want to use. And there's not going to be a redirect URI. I had a tutorial up for all of this stuff, and it seems to be missing. I hope I didn't dismiss it by accident. That would be exceptionally silly of me. No, it's not there. It's not this. It's not this. It's not this. Goodness me. Did I do a stupid? I think I did a stupid. Oh, yeah. Ah! Anyway, it's Friday, August 30th. I am that developer dad, and I'm floundering around trying to find the walkthrough I was using for setting up a MS Graph Access thing. And I'm going to need to open a new window. And I go to developer.microsoft.com. Here we go. Microsoft Graph Fundamentals. Nope, that's not it. How about that stuff? No. No. Build a sample app in minutes. View the tutorials. Let's see. Delegated user app only authentication. Here we go. .NET. Bam. And I can share my screen here, but I'm going to have to do a lot of moving windows around and stuff like that as I get to creating sensitive information and stuff. All right, begin. Register an app for app only. Applications, app registrations. Cool, I'm there. Select new registration. Graph app only auth tutorial, whatever. I've got that. All right, so I need to accounts in this directory only. Check. Redirect URI empty is check. And I need to hit the register button. All right, I've got a client ID. I'm going to need that. I've got the tenant ID. I'm going to need to set up some client credentials in a minute. But let's go to Manage and API Permissions. And there is no default user.read. I'm going to add a permission. Microsoft APIs. Microsoft Graph. Cool. It's going to be application permissions. And then I need to find user dot read dot all. All, not app. Boop. Read all users' full profiles. Add the permission. And then I need to, nope. I need to grant admin consent. And yes. Now, in order to push that button, you actually need to be the owner of the Entra tenant to be able to do that. Offline access and open ID. I don't need to sign users in, so we can remove that permission. And I don't need access to offline access. All right, so we got that, and go back to the overview. Cool. Now I'm going to need to add a certificate or secret. I'll get to that in a minute. But what I'm going to do is open up my notes. And this is going to be MS Graph App Reg, Client ID, Tenant, Secret, and I need this. I need that. And I'm going to pull this over here because you cannot see me do this. Well, you can see this part, but then after I've gone through it, so to create a new client secret for an application to be able to access into MS Graph APIs and stuff like that, you have to create an app registration in your Entra tenant or your AD tenant, and we'll create a new client secret. Allows access for an app to call MS Graph and query user data. And 180 days, 6 months. Yeah, that's plenty. And I'm going to hit add. And I'm going to copy the value of the secret to the clipboard, paste it into this document that I have, and I'm going to go back to the overview, navigate back here. Okay, yeah, the value is still showing, but I don't want to show it to you all. So you're just going to have to take me on trust that it's there. It's there. I've got it. I've captured it. So we've copied the secret value column, and the client secret is never shown again, so make sure you copy it now. That's rubbish. We only use the client credentials flow. Permissions have to be configured on the app registration, and that's fine. And then we can look at the default scopes. Do we have scopes or anything like that? I don't really see them. Is this application calling an API? No. I'm building a web app. Let's see what this does. Is this application calling APIs? Yes. Who can use this application or access this API? This particular API is only going to be accessed by my application. Let's evaluate. I don't need a web app. It's not doing login. API permissions, valid credential. We're good. Disable the implicit grant settings. Cool. And do not configure an application ID URI. Perfect. Beautiful. Develop. Don't store credentials in code or config. We'll use managed identities or Azure Key Vault to store and regularly rotate credentials. Okay. I wonder if it'll let me use a managed identity for this. OpenID Connect. We're going to use MCell, blah, 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 and user experience. This is all behind the scenes stuff. All right, I've got the stuff I need for the credentials to set all of this stuff up. Just for laughs, let's see if I can add a service connector. Create service type. Database, storage, file queue, web pub sub. AI services, multi-service cognitive. Doesn't look like it. Cache for Redis, app config, yeah. Nope. We got to do this the old-fashioned way, which is fine. So, in order to do all of these things, and this is all doing stuff, I'm going to pull this over here to my other monitor. And I've got that. And I've got this. And I am actually going to need to, while I do this stuff, flip to my other view here so that you guys don't get to see all of these secrets that I'm putting together. Hi. So I'm going to put in, all I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new configuration block in appsettings.development.json. And I'm going to call it MS Graph. Yeah, I'm just going to call it, let's call it Microsoft Graph. And we'll just set this stuff up. Tenant ID. Is that stuff, comma, client ID. I do that. Client secret. I do that. And I'm just going to pop over here and copy these values into where they need to go. And I'm going to grab my secret. Secret. I've got a secret. I'm going to save. And I'm going to close. And now we can come back to main screen turn on. Here we go. Good deal. And let's bounce that up there. I forgot to do that at the start of the stream. Manually unpin it. Go away, go away. There we go. All right. Now, get token async. I have some things to talk through here. This morning I started creating a resource access provider, and I called it like MS Graph provider or whatever. And I realized that I might change my mind, or I might need to pull other things in from other sources later on. So I created a new resource access component, or project rather, called gametools.useraccess. And it's currently got one interface with one method on it, and that method is called load user permission groups. Now, there's no implementation inside the user access project itself. Instead, I'm implementing it in a technology-specific project that wraps Microsoft Graph. And this guy, well, first we need to add a project reference to gametools.useraccess. Got it. Cool. And then on the user access graph provider, I need to implement user access. It says implement the interface. Bibbity bobbity boo. Here's load user permission groups. And we're going to make a region. Implements user access. Pound and region. Bam. This. Start of line. This. Start of line. Connects to Microsoft Graph to obtain the list of security groups the identified user object is a member of, not og. And I'm going to need using system dot collections dot generic. We're going to need that. And let's see here. Load user permission groups. List of string groups equals a new list of string. Pop down here. We're going to return groups. Pardon me. And because I am not a complete jerk to myself or future self, task list of string. Let's go to the end of the line. Cool. There's that. Save, come back over here. Actually, wait. I want this. Copy that. And I'm going to say public paste. This is going to come down here into here. And instead of actually declaring a method body for this, return, whoops, load user permission groups, async user ID, not wait, but result. Excuse me. Now, var token, yeah, token equals await, get, nope. Yeah, get token async. Boop. And I think, why would I use C# nowadays in Windows? Pestico asks an interesting question. I've been doing .NET development for most of my 20 plus year career. It's what I'm used to. And for building systems that are going to run on the web that I want to have secure and extensible and relatively easy to get set up in hosting environments that I don't have to stay up all night watching, I'd like to stick with compiled languages that have a lot of security stuff built in. I assume that you are favoring things like Python and JavaScript, or perhaps Go or Rust or whatever. I haven't looked at Go or Rust. I haven't looked at Rust or Go or anything like that. I understand that they're very, very good for writing small, fast API servers and stuff like that. But when you get into stuff that's a lot more complicated, it gets a whole lot harder to wrangle, is the impression that I've gotten from talking to people that do work in Rust and Go a lot. They really, really enjoy the development experience, but from listening to them talk and listening to people talk about developing in those languages and platforms, it sounds like the learning curve is honestly probably too much for this old dog to pick up. I can do anything in C# that I want, basically. And yeah, you do see a lot of legacy stuff in C#, but as of, gosh, I guess it's going on 7, 8 years ago now, I can run my C# applications in a Linux container, which is exactly what I'm doing in Azure. And I can build up whatever I want with C#. The UI library that I'm using, or not the UI library, but the UI framework, Blazor, it does everything I need, and I don't really have to step outside of the .NET ecosystem to do what I want to do, until it's time to do the HTML and the CSS. But that's fine. I'm comfortable with HTML and CSS. I don't enjoy working in JavaScript. And that's personal preference. It's 100% personal preference, Pestico. I'm not going to cast aspersions on people that prefer other languages or anything like that. Yeah, Go is garbage collected. That's an important thing. I wouldn't even be considering doing development at this level outside of memory managed language like Java or C# or Go, for instance. I'll confess, I've been really curious about Go. Really, really curious about Go. But I think the next language and stack I'm going to take on is Python. And the reason I want to go into Python rather than Go is because if I need to define server workload applications, I've got C sharp. And C sharp is perfectly good at that. Go would be me pursuing a curiosity. Python, I actually have a use for. There's an awful lot of system level automation, like scripting and so on and so forth, that I can use Python for. But where it really shines is in iterative development of data processing pipelines, especially when you get into machine learning and some AI, some more deeper, hardcore AI workloads. Um, Python, as I understand it, is probably the best tool for that job from what I've seen. Like being able to just spin up a Jupyter notebook and establish a connection to a language model, whether it's running locally or in the cloud somewhere, like with connect to Google Gemini or OpenAI or any of Microsoft's offerings or what have you, and just start grinding out prompt templates and different excuse me, different transformation pipelines and pipelined prompts and so on. The nature of the Python language is especially well suited to that. Whereas C sharp, which is imperative by its nature, um, and memory managed and all of that stuff, it's a little bit more difficult to do that rapid stream of thought iteration over language models and stuff like that with it. Um, I just this project, it's in C sharp because it's my comfy blanket, so that's what I'm doing. But yeah, C sharp is perfectly good. There are a ton of .NET developers out there, so here's another reason. Going back to your original question, why would I use C sharp nowadays? Um, Oh, thanks. My our youngest is making cookies to bring to his D&D session later tonight, and he just brought me one. But why would I use C sharp? Um, I may actually end up releasing this project that I'm building as a product that other people can subscribe to, and so on. And at $10 a month, because I can always drop the price, but I can't raise it later without really pissing off established customers. At a $10 a month subscription price, 5 subscribers is paying for all of my hosting costs and a little bit more. At 10 subscribers, I can upgrade the security and monitoring features on my cloud environment. At 50 subscribers, I'm thinking about a marketing budget. Oh yeah, and I get that. Um, I started this project on my Mac, and then I wanted to start playing with some AI, but I wanted to run it locally because I wasn't ready to start paying for an OpenAI account or a Azure OpenAI account at that point. And I just happened to find uh, an old laptop that our oldest son left behind when he moved out, and it's got a circa 2016 i7 in it and 24 gigs of RAM. And I'm like, you know what? That's enough to host a Phi 3 mini instance. So I got it running with a Phi 3 mini instance. I loaded Visual Studio onto it because I vastly prefer Visual Studio to VS Code. Again, preference. It's what I'm used to. It's my comfy little diggy hole where I grew up as a developer. Oh God, NeoVim. I I've heard only enough about Vim to make me afraid. Like I've seen the memes. Like Vim is like the Hotel California of IDEs, where you can open Vim and you can get into Vim, but you'll never exit it. Um, but yeah, It's all about personal preference, man, and where you're comfortable working and where you yourself as a developer are most productive. Um, let's say I had a multi-person team and I was doing multiple independent services, and I had a person who prefers Go on Linux and so on and so forth. I'd say, okay, this is the API specification, the Open API specification for the service that I need you to develop. As long as I can call those endpoint methods with these DTOs and get the results I expect, I don't care how it gets implemented behind that API layer. With a couple other provisos. Somebody else has to be able to maintain it someday because you might move on to bigger and better things. You might get hit by a by a Tesla falling out of orbit, what have you. But in terms of, I need a service that can take some input, process it in a certain way, and give me some output. Yeah, gRPC is wonderful for that kind of thing. You'd use protobuf and so on. gRPC is a little weird for traditional developers. For people who have been doing development for a long, long time, I'm all for it, but there is a learning curve, and it's really, really hard to introduce a gRPC type system into an established brownfield system that's been using, say, JSON over HTTP, like API type stuff for 10 years. And there's, millions of lines of code supporting all of it and so on. I come from the enterprise development world where, it's basically just a bunch of weirdos in the basement grinding out the code that makes the bank actually able to operate. And I'm between employers right now, so I'm building stuff that I want to build for a change. Cobalt, no. I've never had to touch COBOL. Luckily, it's all the stuff that I've ever interfaced with is .NET. Occasionally, I'll have to look at some old Visual Basic 6 code, but that kind of makes the taste at the back of my throat kind of bitter as the contents of my stomach start to move north whenever I have to interact with those code bases. Yeah, I don't know that I've ever actually looked at COBOL code. Not seriously, anyway. What did I? Oh, look at that! Cool. That's awesome. Sorry, wife needed to show me the after effect of taking the braid that I did for her last night out, and it's all wavy and rock star looking. So cool. All right, let me test this MS Graph thing here, or let's get it starting to integrate. I've got temp user.razor, iUser access, user access graph provider, graph configuration. Let me see. You know what? When all else fails, let's just break out the handy dandy console client instead of firing up the Blazor client and all that nonsense. So, the console client, I need to open up program.cs, and let's add a project reference to Game Tools user access and my MS Graph provider. Okay. And I'm just going to comment this out. Goodbye. What's all this nonsense? Comment all of this nonsense out. I'm just going to leave it. Heck with it. We'll do this. And this is cheesy as hell. Excuse me. Return. Now, none of the code below that matters. And static string prompt user. That's all that stuff. Build app. Create services. Static void test ms graph connection. And var graph config equals new graph configuration bonk actually I'm going to do this. Static graph configuration build graph config graph configuration equals that return graph configuration rename. I don't need a big honking name for that right here because it's just a private variable and a private method. And I'll go. Actually, it's funny you say I'm not that old to do COBOL. When I signed up for and was enrolled in university the first time I went, or the first time I started it straight out of high school in 1991, there was no computer science program at the university that I was going to. If I wanted to study computer science, I would have had to go to another province to a university that actually had a CS major program. But they did have COBOL courses at the higher levels, believe it or not. And I had people that I knew in my hometown who were working in COBOL systems for various banks or the Department of Veterans Affairs or so on. Yeah. A friend of mine was recently working on a contract for a very large, very old corporation. And he was doing a lot of migration from AS400 and COBOL to dotNet for a lot of their data processing pipelines and stuff like that. Now, COBOL's a pain in the ass to work with, but I understand that once you get it where it's good enough, you almost never have to touch it until it's time to migrate away to something newer, because it's now harder to adapt the software to meet your needs than it is to just build something new from scratch that does what you need it to do. So I need to set cfg.tenant ID. I'm just going to do these as empty strings for now. Tenant ID, no, you dope. Client ID and cfg dot client secret is that. And I need to actually go back to main screen for this part. Or not main screen, but my single cam while I set these values up. Because I don't want to be sharing Production level secrets. Fortran. Oh, Lord. Now, there's a name I haven't heard in a long time. I understand a lot of NASA and engineering type stuff is Fortran. Fortran's really, really great at hardcore math and calculation and so on and so forth. So yeah, I can see a lot of financial systems using Fortran, especially for doing things like risk analysis. Yeah, I've heard of Ada as well. Okay, so I've got all of those things copied and pasted in. Note to self, delete this method before I check in. So that's all hiding. Equals build graph config. Var graph. Whoops. Facade equals new user access graph provider. And I'm going to provide it with the graph config. Cool. What are you complaining about? Oh, yeah. I need to actually come up here and make the logger nullable and make the logger nullable and default it to null. Groovy. All right. It could well be more popular here in the US than it is in Europe. I've noticed that a lot of European software content creators that I follow tend to prefer things that are a little bit more open source from the get-go. I see a lot more Java, a lot more JavaScript, Go, Rust, things like that than C#. And fun fact, C# was actually open sourced shortly after the most recent CEO of Microsoft came on board as CEO. So yeah, the basics of the C# language are now completely open source, as is .NET Core. So the platform itself is now fully open source. You could go download the source code for .NET if you really wanted to. So get token async return groups. And I am going to drop a breakpoint right here. And I'm going to drop a breakpoint right here. And we're going to do a debug start new instance. And we're going to hop over the build graph config, exited with code 0. Oh, yeah, of course, because I'm not actually doing anything yet. Duh. I have to call this method. Here we go. Save. Now let's try running it. Have I tried Vim or Emacs? I have not tried either. User access graph provider. Okay, I can step over that. I'm a dumbass. I've not tried either Vim or Emacs. I think I opened an Emacs session once on my MacBook by accident, and got stuck. I couldn't make it do anything. I don't have a giant keyboard or anything like that. I just have like the little magic keyboard that came with an iMac that I bought 10 years ago. Graph facade dot load user permission groups. And I'll use that email address. Yeah, the Vim meme. There's a guy that I've seen on TikTok recently talking about Emacs, and he's this like funny looking dude. He looks like he's got like the white wide thing and the long white goatee, and he looks like somebody out of like a Kraftwerk music video. And he has that sort of German Swiss sort of northwestern but not Scandinavian European accent, and it's just very, very funny how he makes fun of how he uses Emacs for everything. Just by way of ridiculous examples. Oh, dang, blast it. What am I doing? Yeah, that's fine. I probably screwed up the configuration file when I altered it. I don't want to run the Blazor app anyway. I want to run my console app. Here we go. So we'll step over the constructor. We'll step in here. And this automatically bounces over to the async version. And what is in my token? I have a token. Token, give me the token. Good first step. Now, because I am an old dog and I've got a memory like a sieve, and I've written code against Microsoft Graph more than once in the past 5 or 10 years, but it's been like maybe 2 or 3 times in the past 5 or 10 years. It's not muscle memory. So I've got my token, and that's great. Now, hey, what's up, Frightful? I see you sneaking in here. Now, I need Podman. I have installed Podman on my Mac. I typically use just Docker Desktop when I'm developing in Windows, just because I know it well enough to be able to use it, and it's relatively easy. I messed around with Rancher Desktop for a little bit, and it was a little too opaque for me. And honestly, I haven't done enough development on my actual Mac to have been bothered trying to get Podman set up and running and all of that stuff. I've got it installed, but I haven't got it running. All right. So config.query params .select params top order by. This is list users. I don't want to list my users. I want to make a graph call next. And configure permissions. I don't want to do all of that. Okay, we can probably get out of tutorial mode in just a second. Graph helper.get users async. Let's take a look at this. Get async. Just a second. So there's the display access token async. Settings. Credential graph service client. Here we go. Now, up here in my graph access provider, I've got a graph proxy. Yeah. All right. So let's 86 this. Goodbye. And I feel like that graph service client is probably nullable, or not nullable, but disposable. So down here, thinking. Using graph service client proxy equals new graph service client underscore secret cred, and I need to pass an array of scopes that I want to get. I'm just going to copy those straight out of here because it's pretty standard. And var user equals proxy dot users I think not the position. Okay, now I need the API reference. Metered APIs, tutorials, try the APIs, app only auth, VS Vim plugin. Yeah, I could very much try it. Services and features, overview of users in Microsoft Graph, administer mail and handle contacts, users API here. Oh, yeah. You know what? I've gotten used to it. I've gotten used to using my mouse while I'm coding. And it really doesn't bother me all that much. Okay, so I don't necessarily want to use the API version of that. Apple T, MS Graph, SDK. Here we go. We've got the SDK. SDKs are currently the C# SDK. Come on, gimme. Oh, for crying out loud. You're really going to just take me to the GitHub thing? Yeah, I've already got a base level of the application deployed to Azure, and I'm just getting ready to set up the level of, or I'm getting ready to configure the authorization aspects of the system. I've got basic authentication in place. Here we go. User resource type. Haha. So, adding your own data, custom properties, subscribing to change notifications using a Delta query, blah, 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 blah. Create get user. Okay, good. And app role assignments. Not quite what I'm looking for, but let's start with user get. And as I get into this, the muscle memory, I'm sure, will start to come back. Permissions, I've got app user read all, already set that up. Customer server for 30 euros. Yeah, that ain't bad. I would much rather focus on the code and making sure I've got an elegant design in the actual code system than have to also remember all of that setup and infrastructure and everything like that stuff. I enjoy the system design and the structural design aspects of software code, and I'm really good at it. I don't remember, or I don't have all of these details memorized all the time, so you'll see me referring to, tutorials and so on and so forth all the bloody time. But graph client.users, okay. And it's user-ID get async. So var user equals proxy.users. Come on, wake up. Not users P, but users. And I believe I've passed in a user ID. Dot get async. And I need to await that. So there's that. But as it stands right now, I'm using free Azure grants for the app hosting, a small SQL database, and the only service I'm actually paying for right now is the AI service. And it's like 1,000 tokens for a 20th of a penny. And I've had this stood up since Monday, and I think I've incurred, 5 cents in AI consumption costs. So if user is not equal to null, var groups equals user dot age groups, permission groups, blah, 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 blah. I don't think that's what I want. Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. There comes a point at which, when you're dealing with many users, it makes more sense to host either in a co-located data center where you own all your equipment, or perhaps even your own premises data center, and it becomes cheaper to hire five system administrators to look after all that hardware and the networking and all of that stuff than it is to pay for cloud hosting. I believe the order of magnitude of users to get to that point is probably measured in the millions, or perhaps even hundreds of thousands if each user's workloads are particularly intense. Um, the workloads that I'm running aren't terribly compute or storage intensive, um, and I've actually calculated that 5 paid users for what I've got installed right now would be self-sustaining. And, more than 5, I can start building up. And at $10 a month, oh yeah, if you're doing a lot of heavy data processing, where basically you've got multiple VMs chugging away at full tilt 24/7, get out of the cloud. You're just throwing money down the drain at that point. You're absolutely right on that point, Pestico. But for like a small niche web app that is designed for like busy dungeon masters who have players that are asking for details about the shopkeepers and merchants and tavern folk and beggars and so on that the players meet along their adventures and so on, I'd be surprised if I ever see 1,000 users on this thing. I'd be shocked if I ever saw as many as 1,000 paid users. But yeah, this is a small project. Once you get to a certain scale, it's time to think about bringing the really heavy, expensive workloads on-prem onto and stop running them on somebody else's computer. Now, var groups equals await proxy dot groups and I need to look at the groups API dot filter. Do we have a filter? Groups request builder does not have a filter thing. So let's take a look at that API definition. Get user. Let's see about groups. Groups, come on. List member of. List of users, direct memberships. Hey, here we go. Permissions. I don't care about signed in users. I'm also going to need to add directory.read.all, so that's fine. I can do that in a minute. HTTP request headers, request body, C#. Give me the goodies. Graph client.users, member of.getAsync. All right. var groups equals user dot member of dot get. Nope, that's not how I do it. Var groups equals await proxy dot users. And it's silly that I can't reuse that user object, but it's just returning a bunch of data. Excuse me. Apex. Excuse me. Member of dot get async. I feel like I've heard the brand Apex. Oh, yeah. I haven't looked at any Salesforce coding or anything like that. User groups. How about that? There we go. And to be able to access that, I need to increase the permissions for this app registration. That's easy enough to do. So come in here, resource groups. I need to go to the B2C tenant, sign in. Yeah, Apex is something that I should probably pick up because it'll let me entertain the idea of doing Salesforce, of taking Salesforce gigs. GM Tools application, GM Tools MS Graph. Yeah, I've heard SAP is huge, but it's also kind of a bear. API permissions. Here we go. Other permissions granted for developer data apps. Yeah, I'm not worried about that. Let's add a permission to this particular application. And I need MS Graph. It's going to be an app permission. I need directory dot, let's see, read all for now. And I have to do admin consent. Yes, I want to keep those other granted permissions. Permissions to your application. Yes. And I don't need these bloody permissions for this. GM Tools MS Graph access, yeah. This component doesn't need either of those permissions. Yeah, when you're freelancing, the more languages you know, the better is my understanding. Something I actually want to dig into before too much longer, because after 20 plus years in the Microsoft stack, I'm pretty married to it, dude. And I've got maybe 15, 20 years of career left in front of me. Oh, God, yeah. I'd love to live in Costa Rica. Not just for the tax purposes, but because of the climate. And I believe the cost of living is much more reasonable here than, or in Costa Rica than it is here in the untied states of America. But yeah, I've heard wonderful, wonderful things about Costa Rica. Just live on a mountainside and basically just homestead. Like raise goats and write code. All right, let's step into this and see what we can get out of here. So we're going to step in here. You know what? People talk about crime rates, and I used to live in Toronto. I spent most of my 20s in Toronto, Ontario, and I lived in some pretty darn dodgy sections of Toronto. I lived in some areas of Toronto that folks that look like me would warn me to stay away from in hushed tones and so on. And I was like, come on, man, it can't be that bad. And I learned that the folks that live in those parts of the town that are considered the bad areas or whatever are just people like you and me. And if you live there and act like you live there, then you belong and you're okay. If you walk around like you are not living there and scared of everybody, then of course you're gonna run into some situations where you get preyed upon. Yeah, that could well be a thing. I'm not certain that Costa Rica is necessarily a hotbed for South American narcotics cartels necessarily. String error message equals ex dot message, and I just want to capture that. I don't know for sure though. I have never been there, so I cannot provide um, any kind of objective or even truthful commentary on what it's like to live in that part of the world. If I'm being intellectually honest with myself, I require more data. So we've got our token. Okay, so there's that. My user ID is that. And let's step over. I know it's going to throw an exception. OData error. Well, let's step into the exception handler. Resource does not exist, or one of its queried reference property objects are not present. Okay, so that means I need to use the ID for that user. So let's come down to program. We'll stop execution here. String user ID equals bop and we're going to use user ID here. And Azure B2C app regs, overview, users. Let's take a look at this user. And I need their object ID. Is that what I use? I feel like that's what I use. And object ID is semi-public. I don't feel like that Oh, stop it, Rob. Seagulls, stop it now. All right, so I've created my user access graph provider. Here's the user ID. Let's step in. Let's step in here. Get the token. I probably don't even need to get that token. Now, does my query work? I have a user. Additional data. Is that stuff? Business phones, calendars. How about an email address? Here's the display name. ID is that. I don't have any of this information. I don't really care about any of it. But user groups. And what is the name of this group? Group types, count, app GM tools users. Beautiful. That is exactly what I wanted to get. So, user access graph provider. There is another thing that I'm going to add to graph configuration. And it is public string application group prefix get set s. Now, if the application group prefix, and I'm going to come back to my Entra client and policies, user flow, security, activities, no home, Entra ID, overview, manage groups. I should have 2 groups. For user directories that control permission groups for multiple applications, those app specific groups should all use a consistent prefix pattern in their naming. That way, we can apply that naming pattern as a prefix when an application is querying permission sets for itself. Permission sets for a user for controlling that user's access to application features. I have not seen the Cerebrus inference speed. So there we go. Now I'm going to come down to Program, Build Graph Config, and I'm going to add graph config dot application group prefix equals, come on, Rob, pull head out of butt. And I'm going to say app dash GM tools dash. And save. Let's come back up to our graph provider and say var filtered. Hang on. Holy crap, 450K tokens per second. What's the price tag on that? Good Lord. That's absolutely insane. Who owns Cerberus? It's a model name I've not run into before. Inference.cerebrus.ai. I'll have to take a look at that later on. Okay, it's a llama model. Okay. How many parameters is it trained on? If config dot application group prefix 70 billion. That ain't bad. That's quite large. I saw some talk at one of the more recent Microsoft conferences, MS Build, where they were talking about how much compute is going into the next version of OpenAI's GPT, so basically GPT-5. If GPT-4 were a great white shark in terms of compute resources, apparently the resources being thrown at training GPT-5 are the equivalent of a blue whale, is the comparison that they used. And that's kind of banana pants. For each var group in user groups dot where g, not global, g dot name I guess I need to reference system.link. Oh yeah. Using system.link. I don't know what the hell that is. Get out of here. Holy crap, they're measuring their chip sizes in fractions of square feet. That's nuts. So a little, almost a 20th of a square foot. About that big? That's a big chip. Directory collection response. User groups dot. What do I have access to? Value. Get async dot value. No? User groups dot value is a list of directory objects. Good. Var filtered equals user groups dot value dot where g dot name backing store deleted datetime serialized. Yeah. Oh, what's up with the integrity check? I'm not even familiar with that. All right, I need to comment this out. Okay. Why, are you a robot? Oh, they just think you're a robot? Well, I know better than to ask you to identify a bunch of pictures of boats, because I know bots have gotten pretty good at that. And let's just get up in here. I can zap that breakpoint. Continue up in here. Oh yeah, some captions are terrible. Some of them aren't bad, but some of them are really, really, really awful. Oh yeah, those ones are hideous. I remember when I signed up for X recently. It basically gave me a coding test with like leak code questions and crap like that to make sure I wasn't a robot. All right, member of request builder. Get async. So user groups, it's executed. Come into value. And what is the property name that I need to grab? Display name. Members, I didn't care because I didn't query transitively. Owners, don't care. I just want the names, and I think it's just display name. Do. Okay, so I need users where, so I can comment this stuff out. I'm going to stop debugging. uncomment this, and I need display name. I really directory object. This is yuck. This is very yuck. Very yuck. Dot to list. I don't like this at all. Var grp equals g as group. Not calendar group, but not external group. Graph group request builder. OID group, no. You sure don't make this super duper easy to use anymore, do they? Security group evidence, that's not it. Target device group. How about user group? Is there a user group? Nope. Oh, come on. Good async. Returns directory object collection response. Thanks. No, I need to get the display name property. Save. Sometimes this is just plain silly. Debug, start new instance. All right, so I've got that stuff. Let's pop up to here and just run. Go. So here's user groups. I plumb into value. And I've got a list of Microsoft.graph.models.group. Cool. So usergroups.values equals a bunch of Microsoft.graphs.models.group. Graph models.group. All right. You know what? I'm not even going to do this if we've got the application group prefix thing yet. Var member group names equals new list of string. Bonk. For each var group in user groups dot value. Group dirty rat C grp equals group as paste if grp is not equal to null. We are going to say member group names dot add grp dot display name. Fine. If group is not null and grp dot display name is not equal to null. And in fact, I'm going to simplify this to that. Cool. If we have a filter, var filter groups equals member group names dot where n dot starts with config dot app group prefix. Push you down to a new line so that you're visible. Use null for giving here. We'll do that. Dot to list. Boop. And groups dot add range. Filter groups. Else groups dot add range member group names. And then way down here we return our groups. All right, let's come out to program. Load user permission groups for each string stuff in thing console.writeLine stuff. Great. Save it. And debug, start new. Yeah, I'm still on. I want to get this user group or the security group query running, and I've been pretty chit chatty. Oh, my wife hosts a show about politics and religion, especially within the context of the U.S., or she co-hosts a show with another fellow. She's got the politics side of things, and he's got the religion side of things. Excuse me. Application group prefix. Okay. You silly goose. And Pestico, what I just typed there probably makes you cringe. But I would much rather type out the long form this equals false than using like a negation operator at the start of the expression name. It's just in my mind, when I'm skimming through code really quickly, and when I'm troubleshooting or debugging or doing code reviews or whatever, I tend to skim rather than put my brain into compiler mode. And there we go. Groups and go. And I should have app-gmtools-users. That is a thing of beauty. So I now have a thing that can get me our user groups. So I can rip out this try catch. Should I? Well, I'm not going to tear it out completely, because in the event that my connection to graph fails, I do want to write a log entry. But that's for another time, because I've been at this for almost 2 hours now, and I need to go give my head a shake and do something else, man. One of these days I am going to just do a marathon let's write all the code session. But for now, I am going to say to do wrap in a try catch, log any exceptions, yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that. And then later on, maybe over the weekend, I'll get this stuff integrated into the actual Blazor app so that I can detect who is a member of what groups and start setting up the actual application menus and the security and which buttons are available and so on and so forth in accordance with what groups they are members of in my user store. And that's going to keep me from having people sign up for a free, let me see what this thing does account, and then eating up 1 million AI tokens on me that I am then on the hook for. It lets me set it up so that people will only be able to generate their own non-player characters using AI when they're paid users to the system. So I'll get that set up maybe over the weekend, because I've got a ton of to-dos. I've got all kinds of compiler warnings and this and that and the other thing and all kinds of craziness and nonsense. that I want to just get cleaned up before too much longer, and it's stuff that I don't want to spend time on stream doing. So it's Friday afternoon. It is the last business day of August. It is almost birthday month for both Mrs. and I. So I think I'm going to drop and I'll say see y'all later. For those of you who do celebrate Labor Day, enjoy your long weekend. Please be safe. I want to see you all back here alive when things resume next week. I probably will not take Monday off. We'll see. I'm currently unemployed, so I'm doing this instead of giving my hours to somebody else so that they can buy another fancy car next year. While I am in between and looking for somebody to give my hours to so that they can get rich and buy a fancy car next year. But yeah, have a great, safe weekend. Take care of yourselves. Try to do something fun. Try to do something that is analog and not digital this weekend. And we'll see you all next week. Happy coding, friends.